Today I'm going to share with you my top 10 hacks to grow more food with minimal effort. Do you want to grow your own edible garden with delicious organic food harvested right from your backyard, but you just don't feel like you have enough time in the day to maintain a garden and look after it? Whether you're a busy mum or your time is already devoted to sports, other hobbies, growing a business, or if you just want to make sure that your garden is easy to maintain so you can create long-term sustainable growth, then keep watching because this video is going to be perfect for you. Lazy gardening is actually an amazing thing because it means you're working smarter, not harder, and you have systems in place to work with nature to create abundant harvests. So let's not waste any time, let's get straight into my top 10 hacks so that you can grow more food with less effort. Number 1 is plant perennials. Perennial plants are ones that you plant once and you'll continue to get harvests for many years to come. They are the ultimate in sustainable gardening, and so they are probably my number 1 tip for the time poor or lazy gardener. Perennials are plants such as fruit trees, berries, bananas. There's artichoke, asparagus, aromatics such as ginger, turmeric, and there's heaps of herbs such as rosemary, lemon verbena, and mint. These are all things that you plant once and you can continue to harvest off every year, and you don't have to keep replanting them. There are also perennial versions of our much loved annuals such as perennial basil or perpetual spinach, and these are going to be slightly different to the annual versions, but you'll be able to continue to get harvests from them long term. This year I've planted lots more fruit trees, lots more berries. I've planted artichoke and asparagus, and I'm continually adding more perennials into my garden because not only does that mean I'm going to have more time to pour into developing new gardens or creating content to share with all of you, but it also means that I'm going to have more of a continuous supply of food all year round. Planting perennials helps have a seamless transition between the seasons because you'll always have something being ripe or something to eat while your annuals are starting or finishing. Perennials either produce all year round with plants such as rosemary, or they will have specific times when their produce is ready to harvest. These are things like fruit trees. They often come into production at certain times of the year. And the great thing about that is once you know when the fruit trees you have are going to be ready to fruit, you can start to plan and prepare, and you can purchase other trees that fruit at different times of the year, and then you can get a continual harvest of fresh fruit all year round. So that is something that I am working on in my garden. I'm hoping to be able to harvest delicious fruit from my garden all year round. So that means that I am writing down when my fruits are ready, so then I can fill in any of those gaps. At the moment I have a lot of citrus that is ready in winter, there's berries that are ready in summer, and then my feijoas behind me here, those are usually ripe and ready in autumn. So I still have a few gaps to fill in different months. It is a great way to have that seamless transition and have food available in your garden all year round. And make sure you stick around to the end because I'm going to share a little bit more on what plants you should select for sustainable gardening or for lazy or time poor gardeners. Number 2 is chop and drop. This is a technique of mulching that I use here in this back food forest style part of my garden, and so anytime that I trim my plants or I pull out anything, I can just chop that up and lay it down here underneath the fruit trees, and that acts as a mulch, and it'll break down and feed the soil to then feed my trees and produce more fruit. It is so easy to do. I don't have to move any material anywhere else around my property. I can literally just chop and drop it right here, and that is a sustainable system that I have put in place for this back food forest style garden, and that does work better with your fruit trees and your larger plants rather than in a vegetable patch, because it would be a lot harder to get those cuttings and leaf matter dispersed around little vegetables. It's much easier to do it in a larger space. And having that material there will attract your slaters or your wood lice, which will help decompose the branches and sticks and leaves and turn that into soil. But those are critters that you do not want in your vegetable patch. So that's why I use the chop and drop method mainly in my food forest style garden. And as the branches start to break down, they have fungal properties which the fruit trees love. Number 3 is to direct sow your seeds. This is something that I try to do all the time. It's my favourite way to plant seeds. No, it's not the most effective way to plant seeds, but it takes a whole lot less time and it's so much easier. I find direct sowing takes a little bit longer for the seeds to germinate because it does depend if the soil is at the right temperature for them. It is bird hour in the garden. But once they do pop up, I find them to grow a lot easier, to be pretty resilient and strong compared to if I'm growing seeds inside, starting them in seed trays inside, then they just take a lot more time and effort. You need to check on them, make sure they're watered, and also make sure they're getting enough light, they're not getting too leggy, and then you need to start hardening them off by taking them outside a little bit at a time so that they don't get transplant shock when you take them from a warm environment inside to a colder environment outside. It does take a lot more time and it's a little bit more fiddly when you have to baby them. So where I can, I do direct sow by planting seeds straight into the garden. Then it's survival of the fittest. I just plant a few extra and I check on them every now and then to see if they've popped up, and it's super easy, it's super quick and takes little to no effort. And number 4 is to grow soil. If you're time poor and you only have a certain amount of time to allocate to your gardens, then I would definitely suggest putting a big chunk of that time into growing soil and creating soil improving systems. Healthy, nutrient-rich soil is going to help you grow stronger plants, more resilient plants. They're going to grow quicker, they're going to grow easier, and they're going to be a lot more resistant to any pests and diseases. If your soil is poor quality and it lacks nutrients, you're going to spend a whole lot more time trying to keep your plants alive or watering your garden, and more time babying and looking after your plants that might end up a bit sick or not very strong and resilient. Number 5 is mulching. So following on from growing soil, mulching is another way to save time in the garden and start building soil. Mulch will start to break down over time and feed your soil with valuable nutrients. Mulching will also help keep moisture in so you won't have to water your gardens as much, and help suppress weeds. And weeds are definitely not friends with time poor gardeners. So having a thick layer of mulch is going to help suppress those weeds, and if you do have weeds pop up, they're going to be a whole lot easier to pull out than if they were deep in hard compact soil. Number 6 is to make it close and convenient. Choosing a location for your garden is going to be make or break for your time poor or lazy gardener. Having a veggie patch down the back of your property behind the shed, because that is the best place you think for a veggie patch. It might start off fine while you're feeling enthusiastic, while you're feeling inspired, but over time it's going to be out of sight, out of mind. And this happens to me all the time, and I'm only on a suburban block. So I plant all of my low maintenance plants, such as my fruit trees, my perennials, all on the outer parts of my property, and then I keep my annuals or the things that need to be harvested regularly really close and convenient to my house. So this is my kitchen garden, and it is right outside my kitchen. I can see what is ready, I can see what I have available to pick for dinner, and it means that I utilize it a lot more. I give it a lot more love and attention because I'm walking past it all the time. I can see if anything is getting eaten or needs some attention, and I can also see what is ripe and ready to harvest. In permaculture we call these zones, and it just makes so much sense. When it is dark or it's raining or you've just had a really long day, then traipsing out to the veggie patch might not be high on your list of things to do. But if you do have it really close and convenient, you're more likely to use it and you're more likely to care for it, therefore it's going to be a whole lot more productive. Even if that means that you start off with some containers with some plants and pots close to your house, and then once you've mastered those and you're using them and they're producing, then you can move on to develop more and more gardens further away from your house. Number 7 is grow wild. Creating diversity in your garden is not only going to bring in a whole lot of beneficial insects, but it's also going to create a more low maintenance garden. Conventional gardens with straight rows and symmetrical layouts are a lot harder to maintain and will take a lot more time and effort to keep up with. By creating a garden that's a little bit more wild, it's going to look really lush, and if you do have a few weeds pop up here and there, you're not really going to notice, and they may even be edible or at least have flowers for the bees. I love growing things wild all together, all mixed in, as you can see from my back garden here, and it has brought in so much diversity. There's birds everywhere, there's lots of pollinators and lizards and all sorts of things living here in this garden, and there is definitely also some weeds, but look at it. It's a lot harder to see and I don't really mind. I love a wild garden. Planting edible ground covers can be a great way to do this because it does take up a lot more of that real estate so that you don't have room for the weeds to grow. And growing edible ground covers means that you're going to also be protecting the soil and adding a living mulch. Number 8 is letting things go to seed. If you let some of your plants go to flower and then go to seed and they drop those seeds in your garden, then you're going to have seeds popping up all by themselves next season with like no effort on your behalf. This is another great one for sustainable gardening or lazy gardeners because nature's doing all the work. Back here in my edible food forest style garden, I let so many things go to seed. There's always random things popping up in my garden each year because the seeds have stayed dormant in the soil until it gets to the right temperature or it gets the right conditions. So a lettuce may have gone to seed at the end of summer, and then those seeds will lay dormant in the soil until spring or till the soil starts heating up again, and I'll get all these lettuces just popping up. Some of the things that pop up all the time in my garden are tomatoes, lettuce, celery, because that is one that went wild in my garden. I had celery popping up in all the cracks of the pavers. I didn't have to plant any celery for a couple of years. I had celery popping up all the time, which was just free food, which I love. I also have lots of edible flowers that pop up, and I always am chucking in seeds for edible flowers all throughout my gardens, hoping that they will just pop up. So let me know in the comments what you've let go to seed and what's popped up in your garden. It is one of my favourite things to do, and it's always like a surprise each year what's going to pop up. It's also really good for helping you learn how to identify plants, because as they start to grow you can keep an eye on them and check out their leaves, have a look online and see if you can identify what that plant is. That has gone a long way in my plant identification skills. Number 9 is easy watering. Watering can take up a lot of time, especially in the warmer months, and if you can't be bothered or you run out of time and you don't get to watering your plants on a really hot day, especially here in Perth, then you could lose your plants in just one day. It's definitely happened to me before, and so now I've got some easy watering systems in place to help with that and to make sure that my gardens are well watered in very little time. Some tips are to have automatic watering systems such as timers or drip feeders or any sort of irrigation like that. That's going to save you a whole lot of time and you're not going to have to worry about it as much. The other tip is to have a hose nearby to your garden and make it a retractable one. Nothing puts you off going and watering your gardens than thinking about having to unravel the hose and then put it away afterwards. So having a retractable hose, you can pull it out and be watering your garden in just seconds, and it's going to mean that you're going to keep it up, you're going to do it more regularly, and you're not going to miss any of those really important watering days. The retractable hose has honestly been a game changer in my garden, and I will pop the links to the ones that I use in my garden in the description below. This is not sponsored, but I do work with this brand, and I only work with brands that I love and use their products. Number 10 is getting your plant selection right. So we talked about earlier choosing perennial plants because you plant them once and they continue to produce food for you for many years, but there are also a few other selection criteria when it comes to choosing plants for a low maintenance or time poor garden. And one of those is to choose local or native plants. Plants that grow really well in your local area are going to take a whole lot less effort to grow, they're going to need a whole lot less care, and they're going to be more suited and adapted to your exact climate conditions. Native edible plants are often really interesting and unique and really fun to grow in the garden. They also attract your local native wildlife and beneficial insects, so this can be really good at helping your garden thrive and be more sustainable. Choose low maintenance plants. This one sounds very self-explanatory, but it will be different for everyone because your local climate or your area is going to have different pests and diseases that are going to make some plants more low maintenance than for others in other parts of the world. So the best thing to do is go and speak to your local nurseries and find out what plants are going to be a little bit more low maintenance for your climate, and that is going to be super valuable in creating a easy, sustainable garden. Some plants will take a lot more care during the process of growing, such as tomatoes often need to be staked and tied and kept tidy because otherwise they'll get lots more pests and diseases. So what I often do is grow cherry tomatoes because I find them a lot easier. I find them, I can leave them to do their thing a lot more, and I still get a whole lot of food off those plants. So some other ones that I find a lot more time consuming are things like your stone fruit or things that have a soft skin because they are more susceptible to a lot of pests and diseases. So your things like your nectarines, your apricots, they are a little bit more vulnerable and can take a little bit more work to make sure that you get a harvest. So I have held off on those. I have now added a few to my garden, but to start with, to make sure that my garden was sustainable and easy to care for long term, I did plant more fruit trees that were a little bit easier to maintain and I could leave them to do their thing. So that was things like citrus. I find citrus a lot more low maintenance for where I'm growing. They can handle more dry periods because we definitely get a lot of hot, dry weather here in Perth. And they have a thicker outer skin, so they're less susceptible to a lot of pests. So I have a lot of citrus growing in my garden. I have a lemon, a lime, a blood orange. I have a... what else have I got? I've got a lemonade, I've got the kumquat, I've got finger limes, and also a blood lime, I think it's called. So there's so many different types of citrus. So if you want some variety but still sticking within that low maintenance fruit tree, you have got options. And if you found this video useful, then please give it a like, and there's also now a thanks button just along from the like button if you want to donate more to my garden so that we can buy more plants. I'll even get you to help me decide what plant to buy. Next up, check out my video on edible ground covers so you can take up that space before the weeds do.